Since the dawn of human consciousness, one question has haunted our kind: why do we suffer? And what does it all mean? From the earliest campfires of prehistory to the towering cathedrals of civilization, humanity has grappled with the stark reality of suffering. Birth is greeted with cries, life unfolds with struggle, and death shadows every step we take. Hunger, disease, natural disasters, and the cruelty of one human toward another. All of these form the inescapable background of our existence. And yet, in the midst of this unavoidable suffering, we ask ourselves, what is the point? Why live at all if pain is so certain, and if the fleeting joys we cling to are so fragile? This question is not a modern invention. It echoes from the ancient hymns of Mesopotamia, where mankind pleaded with the gods for mercy, to the tragedies of ancient Greece, where playwrights like Sophocles showed us the devastating cost of fate. It resounds in the quiet meditations of Buddhist monks, who saw suffering, dukkha, as the very foundation of life itself. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw this confrontation with suffering as central to the human condition. He warned us that if we look too closely at pain, without any higher framework of meaning, the path may lead us into nihilism, the chilling belief that life is meaningless, without purpose and without value. But Nietzsche also noted something remarkable. Though every human being has, at one time or another, stared into the abyss of despair, most of us do not remain there. We may flirt with nihilistic thoughts, yet humanity as a whole has never drowned in meaninglessness. Why is this so? The answer, Nietzsche argued, lies in what he called true world theories. Systems of belief that promise a reality beyond this one, a higher plane where suffering is redeemed, where meaning is secured, and where the trials of life are justified. These theories, from religious traditions to grand philosophical visions, act as bridges over the abyss, keeping us from falling into despair. And in this lecture, we will follow Nietzsche's path. We will explore the nature of these true world theories, how they are structured, why they appeal so deeply to the human spirit, and the forms they have taken throughout history. From the utopian dreams of revolutionaries, to the mystical monism of the East, to the eternal heavens of Christianity and Plato. For Nietzsche, these theories were not harmless illusions. They were the very architecture of meaning in human history. And yet, he believed, they also carried within them profound dangers. But before we can reach his famous declaration, God is dead, we must understand the world that God, and many other true worlds, once provided. When suffering overwhelms us, when the hardships of life strip away our comforts, a terrible question emerges in the human heart. Why should I endure? This is the threshold of nihilism. For Nietzsche, nihilism was not just a philosophy written in books, it was a lived experience, a condition that could seep into the soul when one realized that happiness, stability, or peace are never permanent. Imagine a farmer in ancient Greece who loses his harvest to drought year after year. Imagine a mother in the Middle Ages who watches 3 of her children fall to plague. Imagine even a modern worker, overwhelmed by the monotony of office life, who feels every day slip into the next without meaning. Across time and place, despair whispers the same thought: perhaps life itself has no point at all. But here is the paradox. If nihilism is such a natural outcome of human suffering, then why has mankind not collapsed beneath its weight? Why is the world not populated with nothing but hollow-eyed pessimists? Nietzsche's answer was that humanity has always discovered an escape. When the meaning of life seems absent from the here and now, people look beyond this world to another, a true world. These true world theories come in many forms. Some promise paradise after death, others a coming utopia in history, still others a unity with a cosmic spirit that dissolves all individuality. Yet all share the same structure. They divide existence into 2 realms. On one side, there is this earthly life, full of pain, impermanence, and loss. On the other, there is the true world, perfect, eternal, untouched by suffering. Julian Jung, a scholar of Nietzsche, captured this beautifully when he wrote, "A true world is a destination. To reach it is to enter eternal bliss, a heaven, a paradise, a utopia." Thus, life itself becomes a journey toward redemption, a pilgrimage whose end will more than make up for the hardships along the way. Nietzsche recognized that this way of thinking had not just comforted individuals. It had structured entire civilizations. Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Marxism, even the philosophies of Plato, all in their own way held up a true world. Beyond this fleeting one, a vision that gave life direction. And here lies the genius of these systems. They do not simply silence the despair of meaninglessness, they also flatter a deep human need, the craving for self-importance. Think of the Christian who believes their soul, though small and fragile, is of eternal value to God. Think of the Hindu who sees their innermost self, the Atman, as one with Brahman, the very ground of the cosmos. Think even of the revolutionary Marxist who believes that their labor contributes to the destiny of humankind. In each case, the individual is no longer insignificant. Their life matters, not just in the fleeting moment, but in the grand scheme of reality itself. Nietzsche saw this clearly, and he saw the danger. For if these true world theories are illusions, if there is no paradise, no cosmic unity, no utopian end of history, then what becomes of the human need for meaning? Do we fall back into nihilism, or can we build new values to stand without illusions? These were the questions that obsessed Nietzsche. But before we can face his answers, we must look carefully at the great varieties of true world theories humanity has embraced. And so, in the next sections, we will explore their types: the temporal true worlds, visions of utopia within history; the monistic true worlds, found in the mystical traditions of the East; and the eternal true worlds, dominant in Western religion and philosophy. Each promises salvation, each shields us from despair. And yet, for Nietzsche, each also conceals a lie. Not all visions of the true world promise escape after death. Some hold out hope that paradise lies ahead of us, right here on earth. These are what Nietzsche, and later scholars, would call temporal true world theories. They do not claim there is another metaphysical realm beyond this one. Instead, they tell us that history itself is a journey, that the struggles, wars, and sufferings of today are only steps along a greater path leading to a perfected world. Picture humanity as a caravan, weary and battered, trudging across a desert. The journey is long, painful, and uncertain. Yet just over the horizon, so the story goes, lies an oasis, a final destination that will make every hardship worthwhile. This is the essence of temporal, true worlds. Philosophers of history gave these theories their intellectual backbone. They ask, does history follow a pattern? Is there some hidden law guiding humanity toward a final purpose? The economist Ludwig von Mises once described this mindset. Philosophy of history assumes that God, or nature, or some other superhuman force directs the course of events toward a definite goal. For millennia, civilizations framed history in this way. Ancient Jews, for instance, saw history as a story of covenant, a journey toward the eventual triumph of God's chosen people. Early Christians extended this into a cosmic narrative. The world, broken by sin, was moving toward its final redemption in Christ's return. But in the modern age, secular versions of this same structure emerged. Perhaps the most famous example is Karl Marx. To Marx, history was not a meaningless swirl of accidents. It was driven forward by a hidden force, the productive powers of society, technology, labor, and economic structures. Through class struggle, Marx claimed, history was moving inevitably toward its end, a communist utopia, a world without exploitation, without class divisions, without alienation. For Marx, every strike, every revolution, every sacrifice in the present was justified because it helped bring forth that promised future. And so, the suffering of today was given meaning, not by paradise in the heavens, but by the certainty of paradise on earth. But Marx was not alone. The Enlightenment philosophers spoke of the perfectibility of man through reason. The French Revolution dreamed of liberty, equality, fraternity, an earthly kingdom of justice. Even modern technological futurists whisper of a coming singularity, when artificial intelligence or genetic engineering will usher humanity into an age of near immortality. Each of these is a temporal, true world theory. They take the human longing for meaning, for redemption, and project it onto history itself. Nietzsche was skeptical of these promises. To him, they were not so different from religious dreams of heaven. Both worked by denigrating the present, dismissing life as it is, filled with flaws and struggles, in favor of an imagined perfection just out of reach. Temporal utopias, Nietzsche thought, were simply Christianity in disguise. Instead of salvation in heaven, they promised salvation in the future. Instead of God, they invoked history, with a capital H, and yet, he saw how seductive they could be. For who does not want to believe that their sacrifices today are not in vain? That every hardship, every act of endurance, contributes to the unfolding destiny of mankind. It is a powerful vision, and for millions, a shield against nihilism. But Nietzsche would warn us, beware of those who despise the present in the name of a future paradise. For in chasing after the horizon, one may lose sight of the life that is here and now. If the temporal visions of utopia cast their gaze toward the future, the monistic true world theories turn inward and upward to dissolve the very boundaries of the self. Here, the promise is not that history will save us, nor that heaven awaits us after death. Instead, it is that we are already part of the eternal, the infinite, that behind the illusion of separateness lies a deeper unity, a cosmic oneness binding all things together. Nowhere is this vision more clearly expressed than in the traditions of Indian philosophy, and especially Hinduism. For the sages of ancient India, the world of appearances, the world you and I see, touch, and suffer through, was called Maya, an illusion, a veil that tricks us into thinking we are separate, individual beings adrift in a vast and indifferent universe. But beneath this illusion lies the ultimate reality, Brahman, the universal spirit, the ground of all existence. And what is the self, the I, that you take yourself to be? Hindu thought calls it the pied man. Yet here lies the radical claim: the Atman is not separate from Brahman. The self is not a drop torn from the ocean. It is the ocean itself. The Upanishads, the ancient texts of Indian philosophy, declared it in a single formula: Tat Tvamasi, thou art that. This is the heart of the monistic true world, the realization that you, me, every living being, and the cosmos itself are one. To awaken to this truth is to shed the illusion of separateness and enter liberation. Moksha. In this state, suffering loses its sting, for one no longer identifies with the fragile, mortal self. Instead, one rests in the eternal embrace of the infinite. And here we find once again that deep human longing to overcome suffering, death, and insignificance. For if I am one with the eternal spirit, then I am never truly lost. My individual death is no tragedy. It is only the wave returning to the sea. Nietzsche observed such philosophies with fascination. He understood their profound appeal, for monistic visions do more than soothe the fear of suffering. They elevate the self to cosmic significance. As he noted in The Will to Power, some sort of unity, some form of monism. This faith suffices to give man a deep feeling of standing in the context of, and being dependent upon, some whole infinitely superior to him. In other words, monistic true world theories grant man the very thing he craves most: meaning and importance in a universe that might otherwise seem cold and indifferent. This idea is not confined to India. The Stoics of ancient Greece spoke of the Logos, a rational order binding all things. Spinoza, the 17th-century Dutch philosopher, declared that God and nature were one and the same, Deus sive natura. Even modern physics, with its search for a unified field, echoes this ancient intuition that the multiplicity of the world conceals a hidden unity. And so, monistic true world theories stand as another great bulwark against nihilism. For in a world where suffering and death seem to rob life of meaning, these philosophies whisper a counter story: you are not small, you are not accidental. You are and always have been part of the whole. It is a vision as humbling as it is exalting. But Nietzsche, ever the critic, would still ask, is this truth, or another illusion, another comforting story we tell ourselves to make peace with suffering? For even the language of oneness can be a subtle escape, a refusal to face life as it is, in all its raw fragmentation and chaos. If the monistic visions promised salvation through unity, the eternal true world theories offered comfort in permanence. They do not tell us that this world is an illusion. They do not say we are already one with the whole. Instead, they declare this world is fleeting, but beyond it lies another, unchanging, eternal, untouched by decay. The first great architect of this idea in Western philosophy was Plato. To Plato, the world we see with our eyes is not the ultimate reality. These trees, these rivers, these bodies we inhabit, they are but shadows on the wall of a cave. Shadows of something higher, something purer. Above and beyond the visible world lies the world of forms. Perfect eternal ideas of which everything here is but a pale imitation. Beauty itself, goodness itself, truth itself, they exist not as fleeting human experiences, but as eternal realities. And though the body dies, the soul belongs to that higher world. To know truth, then, is not to learn something new. It is to remember, to recall the eternal truths the soul once beheld before being trapped in this mortal body. This was Plato's eternal true world, a reality beyond time, where meaning was safe from the erosion of death and decay. Centuries later, Christianity carried this idea into the heart of Western civilization. The world we live in is fallen, said the early church fathers. It is riddled with sin, suffering, and impermanence, but beyond it lies the kingdom of heaven, eternal, radiant, free from sorrow. Here the soul finds its final home. Death is not the end but a passage, and justice, which so often fails in this world, will be fulfilled in the next. The meek shall inherit the earth. The righteous shall be rewarded. The wicked shall be judged. This was a profoundly powerful response to nihilism. If life feels unfair, if suffering seems senseless, it is only because we see too small a fragment of the story. Beyond this fleeting life lies eternity. For human beings, this promise has always been intoxicating. Think of the peasant working the fields in medieval Europe, living under hardship, disease, and endless toil. To him, the church offered not just bread for the soul, but hope that his suffering was not meaningless. That after death, a life of eternal peace awaited. Think of the grieving mother, holding a child lost too soon. In her tears, she whispers the prayer that she will see her child again. Not in this world, but in another where no death can part them. The eternal true world gives meaning to suffering by transforming it into a test, a passage, a necessary step on the road to eternity. But Nietzsche saw in this a profound danger. To him, the promise of heaven was not an elevation of life. It was a betrayal of it. By making meaning contingent on a world beyond, Christianity robbed this life of its value. Why endure? Why rejoice? Why create here and now, if the real life lies elsewhere? Nietzsche called Christianity a slave morality, a system that taught people to despise this world, to long for another, and to see suffering not as a challenge to overcome, but as something noble and redemptive. For him, the eternal true world was the ultimate denial of life. A beautiful illusion, perhaps, but still an illusion. And yet, the eternal true world remains one of humanity's most enduring answers to nihilism. From Plato's forms to Christianity's heaven, to countless myths of paradise across cultures. Whether it is the Elysian fields of Greek lore, the pure land of Buddhism, or the immortal halls of Valhalla, human beings have clung to the idea that behind the fleeting shadows of this world lies something enduring. It is the hope that meaning is not bound by time, that truth is not subject to decay, and that love does not end with death. If eternal true worlds promised permanence beyond death, the transcendental true world theories offered something more subtle, and perhaps more unsettling. They tell us the truth is not out there, in some distant heaven or timeless realm of forms. It is in here, in the very way our minds are built to experience the world. The most famous of these thinkers was Immanuel Kant, the quiet man from Königsberg, whose writings shook the very foundations of philosophy. Kant asked a simple question: how do we know what we know? Look around you. You see colors, shapes, movement. But is this the world as it really is, or is it the world as it appears to you? For Kant, we never encounter the world in itself, what he called the noumen. Instead, we only experience the phenomenal world reality as it appears, shaped by the categories of our mind. Space and time, they are not there in the universe. They are the lenses through which we perceive everything. Cause and effect, not a property of objects, but a structure our mind imposes on events. In this view, the mind is not a passive mirror reflecting reality. It is an active architect, building the only world we can ever know. And so for Kant, the true world was not a distant heaven, nor a hidden eternal realm, but the unknowable noumenal world forever beyond our grasp. After Kant came the German idealists, Fichte, Schelling, and above all, Hegel. Hegel believed that reality was not a static thing, but a grand unfolding, a dialectical process of spirit realizing itself in history. Wars, revolutions, religions, philosophies. All of these were the movement of an underlying truth, working itself out through time. Here, the true world was not somewhere else. It was history itself, driven by reason, moving inexorably toward freedom. For Hegel, to live was to participate in this cosmic drama, to be part of the spirit's march towards self-knowledge. Transcendental theories like Kant's and Hegel's offered something profound. They told us that meaning was not found by escaping the world, but by understanding the structures of thought, or by seeing ourselves as actors in a rational history. This could be comforting. It told humanity that life is not chaos but order, even if that order is hidden, that there is a deeper logic to existence, even if we cannot see it all at once. But Nietzsche was not comforted. He believed these transcendental worlds were yet another disguise, another mask covering the unbearable fact that life might have no predetermined meaning at all. For Nietzsche, Kant's unknowable noumen was simply another heaven, another realm placed beyond our reach. Hegel's spirit of history was another god under a different name. Philosophy, he thought, had become theology in disguise. And yet, one cannot help but see why these ideas captivated thinkers for centuries. Imagine the revolutionary in Paris, storming the Bastille in 1789, believing he is not merely fighting for bread, but participating in the grand march of freedom. Imagine the scholar poring over Kant's critique of pure reason, finding comfort in the idea that knowledge is not an accident, but grounded in the very nature of thought itself. These transcendental theories did what all true world theories aim to do. They gave meaning where otherwise there might be none. They told us we are not lost wanderers, but participants in a structured cosmos. Why do human beings, across cultures and centuries, return again and again to the idea of a true world? Why do we cling to heaven's utopias, eternal forms, transcendental structures of mind? The answer lies not only in philosophy, but in the beating heart of the human condition. First, there is the fear of death. No matter how rational, no matter how strong, every human being eventually confronts that shadow. From the pharaohs of ancient Egypt building monumental pyramids to house their souls, to the Christian longing for heaven, to the Hindu dream of union with Brahman, all of these true world theories whisper the same reassurance: death is not the end. The body may wither, but the soul or spirit or consciousness continues. In this promise, fear is softened and suffering gains a purpose. Second, there is the burden of suffering. Life is beautiful, yes, but also cruel. Famine, war, disease, heartbreak. These have followed us since the dawn of civilization. How does one endure such pain? By imagining that this suffering is not meaningless, that every trial, every sorrow is part of a larger story, that beyond this valley of tears lies redemption, whether in heaven, in a future utopia, or in some higher order of being. True world theories function like a balm, soothing the ache of existence. And third, there is the deep human craving for importance. We long to believe that our lives matter in the grand scheme of things. Without that, we risk feeling like specks of dust, brief accidents in a cold, indifferent cosmos. True world theories elevate us. They tell us, you are not insignificant. You are a child of God. You are a soul destined for eternity. You are part of the cosmic spirit unfolding itself. You are one with the infinite. These messages resonate, not because they are logically airtight, but because they strike at the very core of our emotional being. Think of the myths that have sustained civilizations. The Greeks imagined their heroes ascending to Olympus, dining with the gods. The Norse spoke of Valhalla, where warriors feasted after death. The Aztecs believed in cosmic cycles, where human sacrifice helped the sun rise each morning. Each of these myths framed existence as part of a greater order, not a random chaos. Even in our modern world, stripped of much of its old religion, we find new versions, dreams of technological immortality, colonizing distant planets, or transcending biology itself. These are secular true worlds, futuristic heavens that echo the same human longing. But for Nietzsche, this longing was a trap. He believed true world theories, no matter how inspiring, came with a hidden cost. They devalued this world. When one believes the real purpose lies elsewhere, in heaven, in utopia, in eternity, then this life, with all its richness, becomes a shadow, a trial, a burden to escape. In this way, Nietzsche argued, humanity had been taught for millennia to despise its only reality. The true world was not salvation, but a prison, a fantasy that kept us from embracing life as it is. And so he asked, what happens when these true worlds collapse? When faith fades, when the heavens fall silent, when history no longer seems to move toward redemption. This is where Nietzsche's most haunting idea emerges: the death of God. For centuries, the true world, whether heaven, paradise, utopia, or eternal spirit, provided humanity with its meaning. It gave us something to strive for, something to believe in. But Nietzsche looked around at his age, and he saw the foundation cracking. He declared, in words that still echo through the corridors of philosophy, God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. Now Nietzsche was not celebrating an actual divine corpse. He was diagnosing a cultural reality. The belief in a higher world, in absolute truth, in eternal guarantees. This belief was collapsing. Science, rationalism, historical criticism, the Enlightenment, all had chipped away at the foundation. By the 19th century, faith no longer held sway as it once did. Nietzsche recognized that this was not simply the decline of a religion, but the unraveling of the very framework that had given life meaning. For millennia, we had leaned on the idea of a true world, but now that pillar was crumbling. Imagine a ship sailing across the ocean, guided by a distant lighthouse. Suddenly, one night, the lighthouse is gone. The ship still floats, the waves still roll, but there is no longer a direction, no longer a guiding point. This is what Nietzsche believed was happening to humanity. Without the true world, without God, the old compass shattered. And what replaces it? Nothing, unless we create it ourselves. Nietzsche foresaw a looming danger. With the collapse of the true world, people might fall into nihilism, the belief that life has no meaning, no value, no purpose. And indeed, if heaven is gone, if utopia is a dream, if eternity is silent, then why live? Why struggle? Why endure suffering? This is the abyss that Nietzsche warned of, an abyss staring back at us. He knew that not everyone would plunge into despair. Many would cling desperately to the remnants of the old faith, even if they no longer fully believed. Others would distract themselves with comforts, entertainments, and illusions. But for the courageous, the honest, those who dared to face reality without illusions, they would have to confront the terrifying possibility of a world stripped of its true world. For Nietzsche, this was not just another philosophical debate. It was a turning point in human history. The collapse of the true world meant humanity was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a darkness we ourselves had created. Would we fall into despair? Or would we find a way to create new values, to embrace life without needing a heaven beyond it? This, Nietzsche believed, was the great challenge of the modern age. We have traced the long history of true world theories, from the utopias of Marx and the philosophies of history, to the monistic vision of Brahman in Indian thought and the eternal heavens of Christianity and Plato. For centuries, these visions of another reality gave human beings direction, purpose, and the courage to endure suffering. They helped explain why life was worth living, even in the face of hardship, loss, and death. But as Nietzsche observed, these true world theories rest on illusions. They degrade this earthly life, casting it as a shadow, a deception, or a test. And as the light of modern science and skepticism grew, the illusions began to dissolve. This brings us to Nietzsche's radical insight that with the decline of the true world, humanity stands exposed to a profound danger, the danger of nihilism. Imagine someone climbing a mountain, sustained by the promise of a paradise at the peak. Every painful step is bearable because of the dream of what awaits at the summit. But now imagine that halfway up, the climber is told, there is no summit. There is no paradise. The mountain leads nowhere. The exhaustion that was once tolerable suddenly becomes unbearable. The suffering that once had a purpose becomes meaningless. This is the predicament Nietzsche saw in modern humanity. Without a true world, without the promise of something beyond, the meaning of life itself was at risk. Nietzsche did not believe this was a crisis we could ignore. It was, in his view, unavoidable. He wrote, "Nihilism is not only a belief that everything deserves to perish. One actually puts one's shoulder to the plow. One destroys." In other words, the collapse of the old illusions could lead to destruction, not just of faith, but of culture, values, and even the will to live. Yet Nietzsche also saw an opportunity. By confronting nihilism head-on, by refusing to hide behind illusions, humanity might discover a new strength. This is why he described nihilism not as a final resting place, but as a disease, a sickness of the spirit that must be endured and overcome. In our next lecture, we will turn directly to Nietzsche's famous pronouncement, "God is dead." We will ask, what did Nietzsche mean by this declaration? Why did he believe that the old foundations of meaning were collapsing? And what are the consequences of this death for human life, morality, and culture? The death of God is not merely the end of religion. It is the end of the true world. And with it, humanity is forced to confront existence as it is, raw, fragile, and without guarantees. Nietzsche believed that this confrontation would either destroy us or liberate us. The history of human thought has been, in many ways, the history of true world theories, visions of heaven, paradise, eternity, or utopia. They gave us hope, they gave us strength, they gave us meaning. But Nietzsche's brilliance and his danger lay in stripping away these illusions, in forcing us to ask whether life itself, this earthly life with all its pain and joy, can be enough. We stand, as Nietzsche described, on the edge of an abyss. The true world is gone. What remains is the task of finding or creating meaning here, in this life, without illusions. In the next lecture, we will follow Nietzsche deeper into this abyss, to understand what he meant when he declared that God is dead, and why this moment, more than any other, marks the beginning of the modern struggle with nihilism.